Hello everyone and welcome to the Tank Club. I'm TC Lee and I've been playing a bit of the Lost Depths PTS, and there's some things we need to talk about in terms of the next patch. I'm trying to kind of not overreact to things. Like, there's a lot of overreaction happening in the community now. There's a lot of like outrage, there's a lot of uproar, there's a lot of people losing their minds about a lot of things, and I kind of been on there trying to test some things out, trying to look at things with a methodical approach and kind of trying to understand how this is really going to impact us as tanks as we go into the next patch. Now, there's quite a few different things that we have to look at in terms of the approach to next patch, and quite clearly at the minute there seems to be a damage loss of quite a considerable amount for a lot of people. Now, it's not just endgame players that are going to actually lose damage in these situations. Like, I don't really understand the whole process. I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of the way that the Tank Club is run, the way that we try to dish out information for the Tank Club. We're aiming the content at new players to bring more people into tanking. We're trying to increase the level that people are able to tank in the Elder Scrolls Online. We're trying to bring more people in. We're trying to make it more accessible. That is the whole kind of point of the Tank Club. That's why I started this whole project 3 years ago, is to try and deliver information that's going to help people want to tank and bring more people into the fold that are capable and able and willing and wanting to learn and develop in the tank role. Now, one of the things I am kind of worried about for next patch is obviously with a DPS loss and with a healing loss that is quite evident, is we get longer fights and we have more difficulty being healed in heal intensive situations. Now, one of the things that I'm personally a bit concerned about is, yes, I am playing in, like, I am trying to do trifectas in trials, the no death, the hard mode, the speedruns, that kinds of things. So a lot of the community are not doing that. But like, from my point of view, the way that I can see it at the minute is content is becoming less accessible, not more accessible with these changes. Because now we're going to reduce the amount of healing capability. And it's not the fact that actually healing is going down. Healing over time is being affected, which means there's going to be a need for more burst healing. But then what that means is more intensive on resources for the healers, which then means they're going to have a harder time to heal because they're struggling for resources. I went into one of the new dungeons, and I've got to say the content team absolutely smashed it once again. So the content team creating the dungeons, the trials, the arenas, that kind of stuff, they've done an amazing job. The new trials have been great for the last couple of years. The new dungeons for the last couple of years have been fantastic. And again, they've really nailed it this time around with the new dungeons. They are great. We did those yesterday. And so yeah, like they're just doing a fantastic job. Now, what the problem is that a lot of this content is aimed at the current DPS, the current tankiness, the current amount of healing. So I don't understand how like we're going to be able to achieve things like no death hard mode speedrun in Dreadsail Reef if we lose 30% of our group's DPS and if we lose 10-20% of our group's healing. I don't understand how we're going to be able to achieve those things if we lose that much damage and that much healing. And at the moment, that's kind of what it's looking like. I tried to do one of the new dungeons on hard mode yesterday, and there was a massive dot applied to my character that's hitting me 10,000 damage per second. There's different bleeds and dots and all that kind of stuff. Now, the heal, that I was getting healed by a healer. They had heals over time on me, and because that's ticking every 2 seconds, it can't out-heal the damage I'm taking because I'm taking damage every second. So the problem we've really got is the fact that now healing is going to be ticking every 2 seconds with those heals over time. What happens when we've got dot damage and we've got bleed damage, and there's different dots and bleeds in the game, and they're very high damage, Barsai hard mode, things like that. These things are ticking every 0.333 seconds, every 0.666 seconds, every 1 second, every 2 seconds. We've got some kinds of damage in this game that are ticking way more often now than we're able to physically heal. So that becomes a bit of an issue that I can see with the next patch. Also, in terms of reducing damage by 30%, how do we achieve things like Rockgrove hard mode, for example? The last boss is on a physical DPS timer. So if you're not able to hit the DPS, you can't do it. How are we supposed to reach those DPS numbers if damage gets lowered by 30%? Now, the way that you've got to look at it is we're trying to bring the game to be more accessible to casual players, your average general player. Let me tell you the one thing that's actually opened the door for more casual players is the Oaken Soul ring. Oaken Soul has probably been one of the best introductions to the game in terms of opening the door for people to do more content, to make players get into more content, to make the game more accessible. Oaken Soul was probably one of the best inventions we've had in the game. The fact is, this is now being nerfed, and this is a bigger problem than nerfing DPS and reducing light attack damage and things like that. The bigger issue is actually, for casual players, is nerfing Oaken Soul. I could understand that this was a very, very difficult thing to counter in PvP, because it's too strong for the PvP environment. But for PvE content, Oaken Soul was not too overpowered, because you're still not able to use it in organised group content. Yes, you could use it in dungeon content, and yes, it simplified a lot of builds, but you're still getting more damage by using a 2-bar build and having a good group that could buff and debuff. Obviously, when you took those things away and you used Oaken Soul instead, you were able to get some good benefits, and your average player would benefit a hell of a lot from having the Oaken Soul ring. Now, you've seen me myself using it in a lot of different content as a tank, and this is what I mean about accessibility. As a tank main, a tank only player, I was able to do Vet Vatishan Hollows, Vet Maelstrom Arena, solo a normal trial, and things like that. I'm able to go and do dungeons, I'm able to go and do arenas trials and all that kind of stuff by using Oaken Soul and maintaining one build. Now that for me is the epitome of opening the door and giving more accessibility. And for players to be able to obtain all of these buffs, which usually have to be micromanaged onto different characters or micromanaged on yourself, and you've just got them, that for me made Oaken Soul the thing that was going to bring accessibility. If that didn't open the door for more players to be able to play the game and do more content, then I don't think anything really will. A few things I'm kind of concerned about is the longer fight times. With lower DPS, we have longer fight times. This makes it more difficult for tanks to stay alive. So while we're trying to improve like damage over time, like players are going to get more damage over time, but they're actually losing damage. Like if end game players are losing 30% of their damage, lower scale end of the spectrum players are also going to be losing damage as well. And at the moment, I've seen some people who are at the lower end of scale of the damage spectrum doing DPS tests on the PTS, and they're testing on the Iron Action Arc. Now, on the Iron Action Arc, it has been changed on the PTS, so it's different from the live server. So now people are not realising that actually we're losing more DPS because the way that they've changed the Iron Action to give additional buffs and things now. So actually, you probably are losing a lot more DPS than you realise. If you are doing DPS tests, I personally have been doing some tests on the 3mm and the 6mm unbuffed, because obviously it doesn't make sense for me to try and compare the live server to the PTS when there's different buffs on the Iron Action Arc. A few things I am concerned about. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's going to be harder to heal as a tank. Our self-heals are quite strong, but our heals over time are being weakened. One of the positives of the changes is the better sustain. So things like Elemental Blockade being a 30-second duration is going to save you a lot of resources. So there are some positives to this. The resources, the things that our sustain as a tank should be better for next patch, because a lot of our durations have been extended on a lot of the skills that we use. Things like I say, like Blockade is an expensive skill. It's like usually about 4,000 magicka, but now you don't have to cast it every 14 seconds. It's now every 30 seconds. So that is like a big change. Things like Engulfing Flames as well. Like it's a long duration, and it's a buff that you may need to use. Now, one of the problems is the inconsistency with some of the skills. So like Scalding Rune, for example, like a lot of the skills have now gone to like 20 or 10 seconds. But then you've got a skill like Scalding Rune, which is 22 seconds. PA is going to be like tricky to micromanage now for console players, because the timing of that, people used to align the time with Caltrops or Vigor, and now those have been extended, which is not a bad thing, because again, it's a resource saving thing, but it's like going to be harder for those console players to kind of try and manage their timing. Some of the things that are like a bit like strange is we've got an increased duration on Empowering Grasp, but then Stone Giant went unaffected and Stagger is still going to be the same. Why can't we just like try and make some kind of consistency where everything stays in kind of a level playing field? To me, it would make more sense to have Stagger as well run at a 10-second duration, because that's going to bring more accessibility to tanks. At the minute, using Stagger, using Stone Giant on a tank is not accessible for a lot of players because it's too much micromanagement, whereas if they extended that to 10 seconds, it's going to open the door for a lot more players to be able to use it. and then it also fits and aligns with a lot of other skills now that are extended to that time period. So it does concern me a little bit with the inconsistent uptimes, and now, like, as a tank, you're going to kind of have less to do. Like on certain builds and certain classes, you're going to cast your skills and you're going to be stood there with nothing to do, potentially. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now it gives people the opportunity to lay down the things that you need to do, and then make sure you're able to just focus on things like sustain and survival. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the inconsistency in the different uptimes and the times that everything are running at is something that I'm kind of questioning a bit. One of the things that is concerning is the Crusher Enchant. So now, with Blockade now ticking every 2 seconds, our Crusher Enchant refreshes on 5 seconds. We're not able to now refresh Crusher on 100% cooldown. The only way to do that is to either be light attack weaving on a tank, which is something that a lot of players can't do, or it's going to be having multiple people using a Crusher Enchant to maintain 100%. So now, obviously, you put down your Blockade, it ticks every 2 seconds, which means, like I say, it's just not going to refresh once it expires. You're going to lose a second every single proc of your enchant. So that's not a good thing. So you're going to potentially be losing quite a bit of DPS by the fact you can't maintain 100% Crusher. So for dungeon groups especially, that's going to be impacted, because if you only get every 6 seconds, you're only going to get 5 seconds of uptime. That's quite a considerable DPS loss over the course of a 5-minute fight. So that's not a good thing. We're going to be doing some more testing on the PTS over the coming weeks, so just make sure you're checking out my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TC_Lee13. And we're doing things like, we're testing the Accolade build. A lot of people have been asking me, is Accolade going to be affected? Well, yes, it is going to be affected. Is it going to be destroyed? No. We used to have the Accolade tank build before this patch, before High Isle, so it's going to still work in Lost Depths. We might have to make some adjustments, but it's still going to have some functionality and it's still going to work to a certain point. Is it going to be a little bit weaker? Yes, it's going to do a little bit less damage, but the skills that we actually use on that build haven't been impacted too much, so we shouldn't see a huge detrimental impact to that particular build. But yeah, we are going to be testing stuff. Make sure you check out thetankclub.com and all the other content. Stay up to date here on YouTube as well. Make sure you give us a follow, and yeah, if you want to make sure you're notified, press the bell icon so that you can see notifications as we get through this Lost Depths update, and so you don't miss anything for the upcoming patch. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.